You know, when you think of the Mughal Empire, you probably picture this unstoppable force, right? Just rolling across lands with ease. But there was one province that completely shattered that image. This is the story of the Mughal conquest of Bengal, a brutal, messy, drawn-out fight that took nearly 100 years and shows you what empire building is really like.
So that's the big question, isn't it? What made Bengal so different? How did this one province manage to push the legendary Mughals to their absolute limit for so long? Well, the answer isn't simple. It's a fantastic story of overconfidence, unexpected genius, and a tough lesson the Mughals had to learn the hard way.
So, why Bengal? What was the big deal? Well, as you can see, it was the whole package. It was a treasure chest, just overflowing with wealth from its trade and incredibly fertile land. Strategically, it was a fortress guarding the empire's entire eastern side. And on top of all that, it was ruled by these proud, powerful leaders who had absolutely zero interest in bending the knee to anyone. For the Mughals, taking Bengal wasn't just about getting another prize, it was a necessity. Okay, take a look at this timeline. It really lays out just how long and messy this so-called conquest really was. It kicks off in 1526, but just look at that end date, 1612. That's almost a century of fighting. We're about to see them get completely kicked out, claim a victory that was, well, pretty hollow, and then face decades of non-stop rebellion before they could finally say they were in control.
All right, let's rewind and go right back to the start. The first Mughal attempt to take Bengal wasn't just a failure, it was a complete and utter disaster. It was basically a masterclass in military arrogance that led to one of the empire's most humiliating defeats ever.
You know, the fight didn't start with some huge invasion. When the first Mughal emperor Babur won his throne, his defeated Afghan rivals fled east and took shelter in Bengal. Suddenly, this made Bengal a real problem for the new empire. Babur didn't invade right away. Instead, he put pressure on Bengal's ruler, basically telling him, hey, stay out of my fight.
And this slide right here shows the perfect contrast between arrogance and absolute genius. When Babur's son, Humayun, finally did invade, he thought he'd won easily. He captured the capital, Gaur, and then spent months celebrating his victory. But while he was busy partying, the Afghan leader Sher Shah was playing a totally different game. He didn't attack head-on. Instead, he quietly and brilliantly cut off every single supply line, every road, every river leading back to the Mughal heartland.
And the result of that strategy? It was an absolute catastrophe for the Mughals. By 1540, Humayun's entire army was trapped, starving, and completely broken. He was crushed and forced to flee India as a refugee. The Mughals hadn't just lost a province, they had lost everything.
So, with the Mughals in exile, Sher Shah takes the throne, and he very quickly proved he was way more than just a brilliant general. Turns out, he was also a visionary builder who created a stable and really prosperous state.
He built this incredibly smart system of government. See, he broke the empire down into these manageable provinces called sarkars, and then broke those down even further. Now, why do that? It was genius, because this structure meant no single governor could get powerful enough to challenge him, and it made everything, from collecting taxes to keeping the peace, way more efficient.
And the guy was a builder, a legendary one. He's the one behind the Sarak-e-Azam, or the Great Road. This was a massive highway connecting Bengal all the way to northern India. And it wasn't just for moving troops, it was a superhighway for trade and communication. And its legacy is actually still with us today as the Grand Trunk Road.
But here's the thing. Sher Shah's dynasty didn't last. After he died, his empire started to crumble. And this was the exact opening the Mughals had been waiting for. They returned, led by a new emperor, Akbar, and he was determined to win back what his father, Humayun, had so spectacularly lost. So what kicks off the next round of the conflict? An act of pure defiance. Daud Khan, the Afghan ruler of Bengal at the time, felt confident enough to declare total independence and even went so far as to attack a Mughal fort. This was a direct challenge, and Emperor Akbar was not someone who ignored a challenge. Akbar's response was swift and brutal. In 1576, at the Battle of Rajmahal, the Mughal army just crushed Daud Khan's forces. Daud Khan himself was captured and killed. So on paper, the war was over. Bengal was now officially part of the Mughal Empire. In this quote right here, it gets to the absolute heart of the problem. Rajmahal was a military victory, for sure, but it was not a political one. The Mughals might have owned Bengal on a map now, but they were about to find out that conquering an army is a whole lot different than conquering a people.
And that brings us to the next and longest chapter of this whole struggle, the incredibly fierce resistance put up by a coalition of powerful local chieftains.
They were called the Baro Bhuiyans, which literally means the 12 landlords. Now, this wasn't some formal, organized army. It was a powerful coalition of local chieftains and big landholders who had been running their own territories for years. To them, the Mughals were just foreign invaders, and they had no intention of giving up their independence, not without a fight. And let me tell you, their resistance was incredibly effective. Led by the charismatic Isa Khan, they handed the Mughals a whole series of humiliating defeats. I mean, in 1584, they wiped out a Mughal naval fleet. Then, in 1597, they even defeated forces led by one of Akbar's most famous generals, Rajmahal Singh. Their bravery became legendary, celebrated in local folk songs that are still remembered.
So for decades, you've got this stalemate. The Mughals are just stuck. Pure military force clearly wasn't working. The final victory would require a new governor, a guy named Islam Khan, and a much smarter two-pronged strategy.
Okay, so what did Islam Khan do? His strategy was simple and brutally effective. He basically used both the stick and the carrot. First, the stick. He brought in an overwhelming military force, a massive army, heavy artillery, and a huge naval fleet. Then came the carrot. He used clever diplomacy, offering land and power to some chieftains while threatening others. He systematically shattered their alliance, picking them off one by one and leaving the main leaders totally isolated.
And you know what? It worked. It worked perfectly. By 1612, the last of the Baro Bhuiyan leaders, including Isa Khan's successor, were defeated and forced to submit. After almost a century of conflict, the long resistance was finally truly over. Mughal administration was now firmly in control.
And to really hammer the point home, to symbolize this new era of absolute Mughal control, Islam Khan moved the provincial capital to Dhaka. He even renamed it Jahangir Nagar in honor of the reigning Emperor Jahangir. This act cemented the shift in power and marked the real beginning of total Mughal rule in Bengal.
Phew. So after nearly a century of bloodshed and struggle, what was the result? Why does this long, brutal fight for one single province still matter to us today?
Well, the impact was massive. You can't overstate it. Bengal was transformed from an independent kingdom into a province of a global superpower. A new Mughal government completely took over. Dhaka boomed, becoming a new center of power and wealth. But maybe the most important legacy was the story itself. The decades-long fight of the Baro Bhuiyans became this powerful symbol of resistance, proving that Bengal was never going to be a passive victim.
And that, right there, is really the core lesson of this whole thing, isn't it? Conquest might be a single event, but control is a long, difficult process. The fight for Bengal really shows us that the true cost of building an empire isn't measured in the battles you win, but in the generations it can take to truly, finally win the peace.